camera flashes exploded in my face like tiny supernovas. I stood on that stage at the National Innovation Summit, microphone in my sweating hand, while 3,000 people applauded. The host's voice boomed through the ballroom, "Ladies and gentlemen, this year's Humanitarian Design Award goes to Dr. Aaron Vale." My heart hammered against my ribs. Not from excitement. From the woman sitting in the third row, her pearl necklace catching the spotlight. My mother, Marla Vale, wore her usual expression of controlled satisfaction, like she'd personally engineered this moment. She whispered something to the silver-haired man beside her, probably taking credit for my success. The irony burned in my throat. This was the same woman who told me 6 years ago that I was too broken to ever be loved. The same woman who destroyed the only relationship that ever mattered. The host gestured toward me. "Dr. Vale, would you like to introduce anyone special tonight?" I gripped the award's cold metal edge. "Yes," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'd like you to meet my wife." The crowd murmured with polite interest as footsteps clicked across the stage. My mother leaned forward slightly, curious now. Then Callan appeared beside me in her simple navy dress, dark hair pulled back, those same gentle eyes that had seen me at my worst. The ballroom erupted in applause again. But I wasn't watching the crowd. I was watching my mother's face drain of every drop of color as recognition hit her like a physical blow. The applause faded into background noise as I watched my mother process what she was seeing. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. Her hands gripped the armrests of her chair. The man beside her noticed her reaction and leaned in with concern, but she waved him off without breaking eye contact with the stage. With me. With Callan. I could see her mind working, calculating, remembering. Remembering the cramped apartment 6 years ago. Remembering the cruel words she'd spoken. Remembering the night she drove Callan away with insults wrapped in maternal concern. "My name is Aaron Vale. I'm 32 years old. I design affordable assistive technology for disabled children. Custom wheelchairs, prosthetic limbs, communication devices. The kind of work my mother once called charity nonsense and wasted potential. The kind of work that just won me a national award and a $100,000 grant." But standing on that stage with Callan's hand in mine, watching my mother's carefully constructed world crack in real time, I wasn't thinking about the award. I was thinking about the last conversation I'd had with her before I walked out of her life. "You'll never find love if you can't even pretend to be normal," she'd said. Those words echoed for years. 6 years earlier, I lived in my mother's house in the expensive part of Brookhaven. Not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't afford anywhere else while finishing my engineering doctorate. I spent my nights in the basement workshop, surrounded by half-built prototypes and borrowed tools, designing mobility aids that hospitals threw away. My mother spent her nights hosting charity galas upstairs, raising money for causes that looked good on social media but never actually changed lives. We existed in the same house but different universes. She wanted a son who wore expensive suits and worked for tech companies. She got a son who wore oil-stained shirts and gave away his designs for free. "Aaron, darling, come upstairs," she'd called down one evening. "I have guests who want to meet you." I climbed the stairs reluctantly, knowing what was coming. Her living room sparkled with crystal and imported wine. 4 women in designer dresses turned to examine me like I was a curiosity. "This is my son," my mother announced with forced brightness. "He's finishing his doctorate in engineering." One woman smiled. "How wonderful. Which firm are you joining?" "I'm starting my own company," I said. "Designing assistive devices for disabled children." The smiles faded slightly. My mother's laugh sounded like breaking glass. "He means it's a hobby. A phase before he gets serious about his career." That night after the guests left, my mother cornered me in the kitchen. I was making tea, trying to ignore the tension radiating from her designer heels clicking on marble tile. "You embarrassed me tonight," she said flatly. I kept my eyes on the kettle. I answered honestly. Honestly? Her voice rose. You told them you're planning to waste your doctorate on charity work. Do you know what they think now? That I raised a son with no ambition. I have ambition, I replied quietly. Just not the kind you approve of. She laughed that bitter laugh again. Ambition means something, Aaron. It means money, status, influence. You're playing with toys in my basement while your classmates are starting at six-figure salaries. The kettle whistled. I poured water slowly, watching steam rise. Those classmates design weapon systems and surveillance software. I'd rather fix wheelchairs. You'd rather be poor and unimportant, she corrected. You'd rather hide from the real world because you can't handle it. I turned to face her finally. The real world is children who can't afford mobility aids, Mom. That's pretty real. Her eyes hardened. The real world is also knowing when to grow up and stop playing hero to people who can't help your career. I left the kitchen without drinking the tea. 3 months later, I met Callan at a volunteer clinic in the South District. She taught reading to immigrant children on weekends, patient and kind in ways my mother would never understand. I'd come to donate a modified wheelchair for a 7-year-old boy with cerebral palsy. Callan was helping him practice using the controls when I arrived. You built this? She asked, examining the simple joystick I'd adapted. It's not perfect, I admitted. But it's what I could afford. She smiled, and something in my chest shifted. It's exactly what he needed. We started talking that day and didn't really stop for 6 months. Callan worked 3 part-time jobs to support herself while volunteering the rest of her time. She lived in a studio apartment smaller than my mother's closet. She wore the same 4 outfits in rotation. She saved every dollar to buy books for her students. My mother would have called her lacking prospects. I called her extraordinary. I waited 2 months before inviting her to dinner at my mother's house. Biggest mistake of my life. Callan wore her best dress, a simple green cotton thing she'd probably owned for years. She brought flowers from the corner store. She smiled nervously as I introduced her. My mother looked her up and down like she was inspecting a defective product. Dinner started badly and got worse. My mother served expensive food on expensive plates and made expensive conversation designed to highlight exactly how out of place Callan was. So you're a teacher? My mother asked, pronouncing the word like it tasted sour. I volunteer as a literacy tutor, Callan corrected gently. I work retail and restaurants to pay bills. How industrious. My mother's smile didn't reach her eyes. And your family? My parents passed away when I was 20, Callan said quietly. I've been on my own since then. I see. My mother cut her steak with precise movements. No family support. No education beyond high school. No career prospects. I set down my fork. Mom. She ignored me. Tell me, Callan. What exactly do you see in my son? Callan blinked, surprised by the directness. I see someone who cares about making things better. Someone who puts others first. Someone who will never provide a comfortable life, you mean? My mother sipped her wine. Someone content to work in basements for free while real opportunities pass him by. The silence stretched like broken rubber. Callan's hands trembled slightly in her lap. I reached over and took one. We should go, I said. But my mother wasn't finished. As we stood to leave, she followed us to the door, her voice dropping to that particular tone she used when delivering what she considered wisdom. Aaron, I need to speak honestly. This girl is not right for you. Callan froze on the threshold. I turned slowly. Her name is Callan. This girl, my mother continued, is clearly looking for stability she can't provide herself. You're being used, darling. Can't you see that? Stop, I said quietly. But she kept going, words tumbling out like she'd been holding them back all evening. You're already too strange for most people, Aaron. Too awkward, too obsessed with your little projects. If you want any chance at a normal life, you need someone who can help you fit in, not someone who drags you down further. Callan's face had gone pale. She pulled her hand from mine. I should go. Callan, wait. But she was already walking to her car, keys jingling in her shaking hands. I started after her. My mother grabbed my arm. Let her go, she said. You'll thank me later. A woman like that can't understand our world. She'll only hold you back from everything you could be. I looked at my mother's perfectly made-up face, her perfectly styled hair, her perfectly cold eyes. And something inside me that had been cracking for years finally broke completely. Our world? I asked quietly. You mean your world? Where people are only valuable if they have money or status. Where kindness is weakness and compassion is naive. I mean the real world, she snapped. You'll never find love, Aaron. Not real love. Not if you keep acting like someone worth loving instead of someone who actually is. The words hit like physical blows. I watched Callan's car pull away. Then I walked past my mother, down to the basement, and started packing my tools. I moved out that night. Didn't say goodbye. Just loaded my truck with everything that mattered and drove to the cheapest apartment I could find on short notice. A basement studio in the industrial district, 600 square feet, brown water stains on the ceiling. The landlord apologized for the condition. I told him it was perfect. I spent the first week setting up a workshop in the corner, using milk crates as storage and a door on sawhorses as a workbench. My doctorate advisor called, concerned. Your mother says you've had some kind of breakdown. I'm fine, I said. Just needed space. She mentioned you're involved with someone unsuitable. I hung up on him. Callan wouldn't return my calls. I left messages explaining, apologizing, begging her to let me explain that my mother didn't speak for me. Radio silence for 2 weeks. Then she showed up at my door on a Tuesday evening, eyes red from crying. I can't be the reason you lose your family, she said. I pulled her inside. You're not. She is. There's a difference. We talked for hours that night. About parents who poison instead of nurture. About choosing your own path even when everyone says you're wrong. About building something new instead of inheriting something broken. The first year was brutal. I worked nights at a medical supply warehouse to pay rent. Days I spent at the workshop, repairing donated mobility aids and building custom devices for families who couldn't afford commercial options. Word spread slowly through disability support groups and family networks. Someone's grandmother needed a walker modified for arthritis. A teenager needed a prosthetic hand adjusted. A boy with muscular dystrophy needed a communication board redesigned. I charged what people could afford, which was usually nothing. My savings evaporated. Callan moved in after 6 months, not because of romance but because neither of us could afford rent alone. She worked mornings at a coffee shop, afternoons at a bookstore, evenings teaching English online. We ate rice and beans most nights. Split one phone plan. Took turns wearing the warm jacket. My mother sent one text message 3 months after I left, when you're ready to be realistic, call me. I blocked her number. Callan found it in the trash. You don't have to cut her off forever, she said gently. I do, I replied. Because as long as she's in my life, she'll try to convince me you're not worth loving. And that's a lie I refuse to hear. She kissed me then, and I knew I'd made the right choice. My breakthrough came from unexpected kindness. A physical therapist named Rourke who worked at the county hospital started referring clients to me. Budget cuts meant the hospital couldn't afford customization anymore. Insurance denied most modifications as not medically necessary. Families were stuck with generic equipment that didn't fit their needs. You do better work than the commercial vendors, Rourke told me. And you actually listened to patients. He was right about the listening. I spent hours with each family, understanding their specific challenges. A standard wheelchair might work for some people, but not for a 12-year-old girl with joint problems who needed custom arm supports. Not for a boy with cerebral palsy whose muscle spasms required particular padding. Not for an elderly woman whose arthritis made standard controls impossible. The commercial companies built one design and forced everyone to adapt. I built each device around the person who'd use it. Word spread faster. Soon I was getting calls from across the state. People drove hours to my basement workshop. I worked 16-hour days and still couldn't keep up with demand. Callan started helping with intake and scheduling. "You need to scale up," she said one night, both of us exhausted. "How?" I gestured at our cramped space. "I can barely afford materials." She showed me a laptop screen. "Crowdfunding. Tell people what you're doing. Ask for help." We launched the campaign in January. I told our story badly, stumbling through a homemade video shot on Callan's phone. Showed the workshop, the devices, introduced some of the families I'd helped. Asked for $20,000 to buy better equipment and materials. Expected nothing. The campaign went viral in 3 days. News outlets picked it up. Engineer leaves wealthy family to help disabled kids. Social media exploded with shares. The donations poured in so fast I thought the website was broken. 20,000 in the first week. 50,000 by the end of the month. 100,000 by the time the campaign closed. I sat on our apartment floor surrounded by donation notifications, unable to process it. Callan cried happy tears. "People believe in you," she whispered. "They see what I see." But it wasn't just money. Engineers started contacting me, offering advice on manufacturing. Suppliers offered materials at cost. A retired factory owner in the next state offered warehouse space for free. Within 6 months, Vale Assistive Designs was a real company with a real workshop and 5 employees. All people who believed disabled children deserved better than generic medical equipment designed by committees who'd never met them. We kept prices as low as possible. Offered payment plans. Gave away devices to families who couldn't afford anything. My mother never contacted me, not once, though I knew she must have seen the news coverage. Year 2 brought both validation and exhaustion. We were helping 300 families across 12 states. Manufacturing simple devices in bulk, customizing complex ones individually. The work never stopped. I survived on coffee and stubbornness. Callan managed the business side while teaching part-time online. She was better at organization than I'd ever be. Better at talking to people, understanding what they needed even when they couldn't articulate it. We got married on a Tuesday afternoon at the courthouse downtown. No ceremony, no guests, just us and a judge and rings we bought at a pawn shop for $40. Callan wore the same green dress from that disastrous dinner years ago. I wore the only button-up shirt I owned without oil stains. We exchanged vows in 3 minutes, kissed in the hallway, and went back to work. It was perfect. My mother would have hated everything about it, which made it more perfect. That summer, a foundation director named Vex called. "I work for the Pathways Foundation," she said. "We fund innovative solutions to accessibility challenges. Your work caught our attention." I was suspicious of foundations. Rich people giving away money to feel good about themselves while changing nothing fundamental. "What do you want?" I asked bluntly. "To offer you a 3-year development grant. $500,000. No strings, just reporting requirements." I almost dropped the phone. The grant transformed everything. We moved to a proper facility with room for manufacturing, design labs, and a showroom where families could test devices before ordering. Hired 15 more people, including specialized engineers and occupational therapists. Developed partnerships with hospitals and clinics across the country. But the real breakthrough was scaling production without sacrificing customization. We created modular designs, base units that could be modified with different components depending on individual needs. A wheelchair frame that accepted dozens of different seat types, controls, and support systems. A prosthetic socket system that could be adjusted as children grew. Communication boards that could be updated with new vocabulary and abilities. We cut costs by 80% while improving quality. Families who couldn't afford anything suddenly had options. Insurance companies started covering our devices because they cost less than commercial alternatives. 3 years after leaving my mother's house, we'd helped over 2,000 people. The work was exhausting, all-consuming, never-ending. But every time a parent cried thanking me because their child could finally move independently, every time a kid smiled using a device I'd built specifically for them, I knew I'd made the right choice. Callan knew it too. "Your mother was wrong about everything," she said one night. "You found love. You built something that matters. You helped thousands of people." I pulled her close. "I didn't find love. I built it. With you." The nomination letter arrived on a Wednesday. Thick cream envelope, official seal, my name in formal script. "You've been nominated for the National Innovation Award," Callan read aloud, her voice rising with excitement. "Humanitarian category. The ceremony is in 6 weeks at the Grand Marquis Hotel." I felt sick immediately. "Who nominated me?" She scanned the letter. "The sponsor is, oh." Her face changed. "The Marla Vale Foundation. My mother's charity. The one she ran for tax breaks and social status. The one that raised millions for causes she never actually cared about, funneling most of the money into administrative costs and galas." "I'm not going," I said immediately. Callan set down the letter. "Aaron. She's trying to take credit. Make it look like she supported me all along. I won't let her." "This isn't about her," Callan said firmly. "This is about everyone you've helped. Everyone who believes in what we built. You deserve this recognition." "I don't need recognition." "Maybe not. But they do." She pulled up her laptop, showed me emails from families we'd worked with. Parents asking if the rumors were true, if I'd really been nominated. Kids excited that Dr. Aaron might win an award. People who wanted to see kindness validated, compassion rewarded. I read through the messages, my throat tight. "She'll be there," I said quietly. "At the ceremony." Callan took my hand. "Let her. Let her see exactly what you built without her." The 6 weeks passed too quickly. We prepared for the ceremony while keeping up with work orders, design modifications, and the endless administrative tasks of running a growing company. I tried not to think about my mother. Failed constantly. Callan found me one night staring at old photos on my phone. My childhood, back when my mother seemed proud of me. Before I became the wrong kind of son. "You're allowed to miss who she used to be," Callan said gently. "Or who you thought she was." "I miss having a mother," I admitted. "I don't miss her." The distinction mattered. I'd grieved the relationship years ago, mourned the mother I wished I'd had instead of the one I got. But seeing her name on that nomination letter reopened wounds I thought had scarred over. Would she apologize? Probably not. Would she take credit? Absolutely. Would she ignore Callan, pretend the past never happened? Most likely. I prepared myself for disappointment and manipulation. What I didn't prepare for was the possibility that she might not recognize Callan at all. That she'd forgotten the woman she'd insulted and dismissed. That we'd become so insignificant in her memory that years of pain meant nothing. The night before the ceremony, I couldn't sleep. Callan held me in the dark, neither of us speaking, both of us knowing tomorrow would change something fundamental. We just didn't know what yet. The Grand Marquis Hotel lobby sparkled with wealth and importance. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, people in evening wear worth more than my first year's rent. I felt immediately out of place in my rented tuxedo. Callan looked stunning in a simple navy dress we bought at a department store clearance sale, but I could see her discomfort. This was my mother's world, and we were tourists. Dr. Vale? A young woman with a clipboard approached. I'm Keisha, the event coordinator. We're so excited to honor your work tonight. She ran through the schedule while I tried to focus. Reception first, then dinner, then the awards ceremony. 3 categories, mine was last. You'll sit at table 7 with your guest and other nominees, Keisha explained. The foundation sponsors sit at tables 1 through 3. My mother would be front row. Of course she would. We moved through the reception in a daze. People congratulated me, asked about my work, took photos. I smiled and answered questions while my eyes scanned the crowd for the woman I both wanted and dreaded to see. Then I spotted her. Near the bar, holding court with a group of well-dressed donors. Still beautiful at 60, hair perfectly styled, wearing a cream dress that probably cost what I made in a month. She was laughing at something, her hand on a silver-haired man's arm. Looking entirely at ease. I steered Callan in the opposite direction, not ready for that confrontation yet. We found our table, met the other nominees. A woman who'd developed clean water systems for rural communities. A man who'd created affordable solar panels for developing nations. A teenager who'd invented a device to detect contaminated food. All of them doing important work that would never make them rich. All of them proof that success meant more than money. The lights dimmed for dinner. I picked at expensive food I couldn't taste, hyper-aware of my mother 3 tables away. Callan squeezed my hand under the table. Breathe, she whispered. After dinner, the awards ceremony began. The host was a famous comedian known for philanthropy work. He made jokes that landed well, talked about the importance of innovation serving humanity. Called up the first category winner, a doctor who developed mobile clinics for homeless populations. The second category went to an agricultural engineer who'd created drought-resistant crops. Then the host's voice turned serious. Our final category tonight honors someone who proves that the best technology comes from the heart. Someone who left comfort and privilege to build something that changes lives every single day. My stomach dropped. He was talking about me. About leaving my mother. The host continued. Dr. Aaron Vale walked away from a wealthy family to design affordable assistive devices for disabled children. Today, his company helps thousands of families who couldn't afford commercial alternatives. The screen behind the stage lit up with a video. Families we'd helped, talking about how our devices changed their lives. A mother crying grateful tears because her son could finally communicate. A teenager showing off his custom prosthetic arm that let him play guitar. A girl racing her modified wheelchair, laughing pure joy. I watched my work play out in front of 3,000 people and felt Callan's hand tighten in mine. The video ended. The host smiled. Ladies and gentlemen, this year's Humanitarian Innovation Award goes to Dr. Aaron Vale. The ballroom exploded in applause. I stood on shaking legs, Callan standing with me. We walked toward the stage together because I couldn't do this without her. The spotlight was blinding. The microphone felt heavy in my hand. I'd prepared a speech, practiced it 100 times. But standing there, looking out at the crowd, at my mother in the 3rd row with shock spreading across her face, all my prepared words evaporated. Thank you, I started, voice rough. This award isn't really mine. It belongs to every family who trusted me. Every engineer who helped. Every person who believed disabled children deserve better. The crowd murmured approval. I took a breath. 6 years ago, someone told me I'd never be loved. That I was too strange, too awkward, too focused on the wrong things. They said I'd waste my life on charity work that meant nothing. Complete silence now. My mother's face had gone pale. They were wrong about almost everything, I continued, my voice stronger. Because I found something more valuable than approval. I found purpose. I found work that matters. I found people who saw value in kindness instead of profit. I turned slightly. Callan, could you come up here please? She hesitated, then walked onto the stage. The crowd applauded politely, not understanding yet. I took her hand. This is my wife, I said clearly. The same woman I was dating 6 years ago when someone told her she wasn't good enough. That she'd hold me back. That she was using me for stability she couldn't provide herself. Callan's eyes were wet, but she smiled. The crowd's energy shifted as people realized this wasn't a standard acceptance speech. That someone was wrong, I said, looking directly at my mother now. Because Callan didn't hold me back. She pushed me forward. She believed in me when no one else did. She worked 3 jobs so I could chase an impossible dream. She turned that dream into a company that changes lives. My mother sat frozen, her face a mask of shock and dawning recognition. She was remembering now. Remembering the dinner, the cruel words, the girl in the green dress. To the person who said I'd never find love, I said quietly into the microphone, my words carrying to every corner of the ballroom, thank you. You gave me reason to prove that kindness outlasts cruelty. That compassion beats contempt. That real love builds instead of destroys. The silence lasted 3 heartbeats. Then someone started clapping. Then another. Then the entire ballroom rose in a standing ovation that shook the chandeliers. Callan turned to me, tears streaming, and kissed me in front of 3,000 people and a dozen cameras. I held her and let myself feel everything I'd kept locked away for 6 years. Vindication. Relief. Love that had survived every attempt to destroy it. When we finally pulled apart, I looked at the crowd. Most people were applauding enthusiastically, moved by what they thought was a romantic story. But a few people in the front rows were staring at my mother. Whispering. Connecting the dots. The woman who'd spoken those cruel words. The foundation sponsor. The mother who'd rejected her own son. My mother sat rigid in her chair, unable to move or clap or react. Her carefully constructed image cracking in real time. The silver-haired man beside her leaned in with concern, but she waved him off without looking away from the stage. From us. The host returned, shook my hand, said something I didn't hear over the continued applause. We walked off stage together, Callan's hand in mine, the award's weight solid in my other hand. Behind us, my mother remained frozen in her seat while everyone else celebrated. The irony was perfect. She'd spent years trying to control my life, shape me into someone she could be proud of. Instead, I'd become someone thousands of strangers were proud of, someone who succeeded by rejecting everything she valued. The after-party was chaos. People wanted photos, interviews, to shake my hand and hear about the work. Reporters asked about the speech, who I'd been talking about, what the full story was. I deflected gently, keeping it vague. This wasn't about revenge or public humiliation. It was about truth. Callan stayed close, fielding questions she could answer, protecting me from the worst of the attention. We made eye contact across the room multiple times, communicating without words the way we'd learned over 6 years together. Are you okay? Her eyes asked. Getting there, mine replied. I didn't see my mother leave, but at some point I noticed her seat was empty. The silver-haired man was gone too. She'd fled before anyone could corner her with questions, before the whispers became confrontations. Part of me felt guilty. I'd essentially called her out in front of her peers and donors. Damaged her reputation, maybe destroyed the carefully crafted image she'd spent decades building. But a larger part of me felt nothing but cold satisfaction. She'd tried to damage me first. Tried to convince me I was unlovable, that my dreams were worthless, that the woman I loved was using me. Every word had been a knife. I just handed those knives back. Around midnight, Callan and I escaped to the hotel lobby. Found a quiet corner with leather chairs and dim lighting. Sat together in exhausted silence. We stayed at the hotel that night, too tired to drive home. In the morning, I woke to 17 missed calls and 34 text messages. Most were congratulations from friends, colleagues, families we'd helped. 3 were from numbers I didn't recognize. And 1 was from my mother. We need to talk. Please. I showed the message to Callan over room service coffee. She read it without expression. What do you want to do? She asked. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to ignore it. She doesn't deserve closure or explanation. And the other part? Wants to hear what she has to say. Even though I know it won't be enough. Callan set down her coffee cup. I'll support whatever you decide. But Aaron, remember that you don't owe her forgiveness. You don't owe her a relationship. You don't owe her anything. She was right. I'd spent years feeling guilty for walking away, wondering if I'd been too harsh, too unforgiving. But I hadn't been harsh enough. I'd simply stopped accepting abuse and called it self-preservation. I called my mother back. She answered on the first ring. Aaron. Her voice sounded strained. Can we meet? Please. Just coffee. Just talk. I looked at Callan, who nodded slightly. The cafe on Morrison Street, I said. 2 hours. I hung up before she could respond. The cafe was deliberately neutral ground, a place neither of us had history. I arrived early, chose a table in the back corner. Callan waited in the car, giving me space but staying close in case I needed her. My mother arrived exactly on time, which surprised me. She always ran late, making people wait as a power move. She looked smaller than I remembered. Tired. Her makeup couldn't quite hide the circles under her eyes. Thank you for meeting me, she said, sitting across from me without ordering anything. I waited, saying nothing. She deserved to do the work here. I owe you an apology, she started, then paused. Actually, I owe you 1,000 apologies. For years of cruelty I told myself was guidance. I kept my face neutral. Last night, watching you on that stage, she continued, I realized I didn't recognize my own son. Not because you'd changed, but because I never really saw you. I saw what I wanted you to be. Some reflection of my own ambitions. That's not an apology, I said quietly. That's an observation. She flinched. You're right. I'm sorry, Aaron. I'm sorry for every cruel word. Sorry for hurting Callan. Sorry for trying to control your life instead of supporting it. Sorry for valuing money and status over kindness and compassion. The words sounded genuine. But words were easy. Actions were what mattered. What do you want? I asked directly. From this conversation, from me, what are you hoping to get? She looked down at her hands, twisted together on the table. Honestly? I don't know. Forgiveness, maybe. A chance to be in your life again. To know the man you've become instead of the son I tried to force you to be. You don't get to know him, I said, not unkindly. You lost that privilege years ago. You don't get to swoop back in now that I'm successful and claim credit or connection. I know. Her voice cracked slightly. I know I don't deserve anything. But Aaron, you're my son. My only child. Watching you succeed without me, watching you build this beautiful life and shut me out completely. I didn't shut you out, I interrupted. You pushed me away. There's a difference. You made it clear I wasn't welcome unless I became someone else. So I did. I became someone better. Someone you never believed I could be. She was crying now, quiet tears that smudged her perfect makeup. I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not pity, not guilt. Just exhaustion. If you want to make amends, I said slowly, start by actually supporting the work instead of just sponsoring awards for publicity. Veil Assistive Designs needs funding for expansion. We have a waiting list of 800 families. Donate without conditions. Without your name attached. Without expecting anything back. She nodded. I will. I'll talk to the foundation board today. We talked for another hour. Not about rebuilding our relationship, because that seemed impossible. But about practical things. How her foundation could genuinely help instead of just performing charity. How she might volunteer her organizational skills without trying to take control. How she could support my work without inserting herself into my life. Baby steps towards something resembling peace, if not forgiveness. When we finished, I stood to leave. She stood too, hesitated, then pulled me into a hug I didn't return but didn't reject either. I'm proud of you, she whispered. I know that means nothing now. But I am. I pulled back gently. Being proud is easy. Being kind was hard. That's what you never understood. I left her there and walked to the car where Callan was waiting. Drove home to our small house and our messy life and our important work. My mother kept her word about the foundation funding. 3 weeks later, we received a grant for $2 million with no strings attached, donated anonymously through her charity. It let us expand to 5 new states, hire 30 more people, help 3,000 more families. She volunteered twice at our facility, keeping her distance from me but working hard alongside other volunteers. We weren't reconciled. Probably never would be. But we'd reached an understanding. 6 months after the award ceremony, a local newspaper interviewed me about the expansion. The reporter asked about my journey, about leaving my family, about the viral moment at the ceremony. Your mother said you'd never find love, the reporter read from her notes. What would you say to her now? I thought about it carefully. About the years of pain and doubt. About Callan standing beside me through everything. About the families we'd helped and the work we'd built. About my mother showing up to volunteer, quiet and humble in ways she'd never been before. I'd say she was right about one thing, I answered finally. I didn't find love. I built it. Day by day, choice by choice. I built it with someone who saw value in kindness. I built it through work that actually matters. I built it by refusing to become the person she wanted and embracing the person I already was. The reporter smiled. That's beautiful. It's just true, I said. Real love isn't something you discover or earn. It's something you create through patience and trust and showing up even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. That night, Callan and I sat on our porch watching the sunset. The same porch where we'd cried together years ago when money was tight and the future seemed impossible. The same porch where we'd celebrated our first major donation. The same porch where we'd gotten married in our minds long before the courthouse made it official. Do you regret any of it? She asked quietly. The fight with your mom? Walking away? I pulled her closer. Not for a second. Every hard choice led here. To you, to this work, to a life that actually means something. She rested her head on my shoulder. Your mom was wrong about everything. Almost everything, I corrected. She was right that I needed to change. She just didn't understand that the change had to come from becoming more myself, not less. We sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned orange and purple. Inside, my phone buzzed with messages from families needing help, engineers with design ideas, volunteers offering their time. The work never stopped. But neither did the purpose that fueled it. My mother's words had haunted me for years. You'll never find love. She'd meant it as a weapon, a way to control me through fear and doubt. Instead, it became a challenge I accepted without realizing it. I proved her wrong by building a life so full of love that her cruelty couldn't touch it anymore. Love in my marriage to Callan. Love in work that changed lives. Love in a community of people who believed disabled children deserved dignity and independence. Love that had nothing to do with approval or validation from someone who'd never understood what love actually meant. The next morning, I returned to the workshop. A new order had come in overnight, an emergency request for a custom wheelchair for a 6-year-old boy with muscular dystrophy. His family had been turned down by 3 commercial vendors who said his needs were too complicated. I read through the medical reports, made some sketches, calculated costs. Started designing something that would work specifically for him, that would give him mobility and independence and the childhood he deserved. This was what I'd chosen over my mother's approval. This work, this purpose, this constant fight to make the world slightly better for people who'd been forgotten by systems that prioritized profit over compassion. And I'd do it again every single time. Callan found me in the workshop around noon with sandwiches and coffee. She'd been handling phone calls all morning, intake appointments with new families, logistics for the expansion. 3 more hospitals want to partner with us, she reported, sitting beside me on the workbench. And that engineering student from state called again. Still wants to volunteer. I updated her on the emergency wheelchair project. We discussed materials, timeline, costs. Then we ate lunch together surrounded by tools and prototypes and half-finished devices, planning how to help as many people as possible with the limited resources we had. It wasn't glamorous. Wasn't easy. Wasn't the life my mother had imagined for me. But it was mine. Built from nothing but stubborn compassion and the love of someone who believed in me when belief seemed impossible. That evening, I got a text from my mother. Just a photo, no words. She was at one of her charity galas, wearing an expensive dress and her practiced smile. But pinned to her dress was a small button with our company logo. A tiny acknowledgement. A quiet statement to her wealthy friends that she supported this work. It wasn't enough to erase years of cruelty. But it was something. A step toward understanding that success meant more than money, that love meant more than control, that the son she'd rejected had become someone worth respecting on his own terms. I showed the photo to Callan. She studied it carefully. Think she's changed? Changing, I corrected. Maybe. Or maybe she's just learned to hide her disapproval better. Does it matter? I thought about it. Not really. She doesn't get to define my worth anymore. That's the important part. We went to bed that night in our small house with our second-hand furniture and our overflowing work schedules. Callan fell asleep quickly, exhausted from another 16-hour day. I stayed awake a while longer, thinking about the journey from my mother's basement to this moment. Thinking about the boy I'd been, desperate for approval and confused why kindness seemed to make people angry. Thinking about the man I'd become, who'd learned that approval from the wrong people meant less than nothing. My mother had said I'd never find love. She'd been trying to hurt me, to make me doubt myself, to convince me that without her guidance I'd fail at everything that mattered. Instead, her cruelty became the catalyst for everything good in my life. Because in trying to escape her judgment, I'd found my purpose. In proving her wrong, I'd built something extraordinary. In refusing to believe her definition of love, I'd created my own. And that love, the kind built on mutual respect and shared values and daily choices to support each other, that love was unshakable. It had survived poverty and doubt and years of hard work. It had transformed from 2 broken people finding each other into a partnership that changed thousands of lives. The award sitting on our bookshelf, the one that had brought everything full circle, caught moonlight through the window. I remembered standing on that stage, my mother's shocked face in the crowd, Callan beside me proving that love was real and possible and worth every sacrifice. You'll never find love, my mother had said. She was right. I didn't find it. I built it with my own hands, one choice at a time, until it became something so strong that nothing could break it. Not cruelty, not poverty, not doubt. Nothing. And that, more than any award or recognition or success, was the real victory.